Yeah, so first of all, Meredith, thank you so
You're
much
so
for
welcome.
being here.
Our
One,
joy.
yes. You know, you all have to know that ever since Meredith and her whole team came onto this campus, I mean, the warm-hearted energy that all of you are radiating was immediately just a blessing to be around
Thank you, Timo.
and it's a great honor for us to have you here at Brown. And as you probably know, this is a very new hall, and you are one of the first
Oh, that's great. It's a beautiful hall.
artists.
People on the balcony, were we looking up enough for you? For you? The New York accent, for you? Yeah, because we were really, wow, you know, like when you just open up, it's incredible. This is a beautiful hall. I was also curious, I was reading about it. So you could take this stage down and just have an open space?
You can also move the walls into different configurations.
Wow.
It's
Amazing.
different scenarios.
The only thing is you get kind of lost back there. Like how you, yeah, I was wandering around trying to find my way and like,
I know.
whoa.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we can maybe work on the signage. Well, and one of the things that we're doing here at Brown in this first year of this new hall, we have something that's called the Ignite series, and we're trying to ignite this new hall with some very wonderful events and artists. And when it came to the question who to invite, I immediately had the idea to invite you.
Oh,
And the
thank you.
reason is, aside from you being awesome, is that you are a truly multidisciplinary artist, and I think it is in a way such a prototype for what is possible in artistic practice. And I think one of my first questions for you would be, how did you get to this multidimensional idea about artistic practice?
I think it came from growing up in a musical family, but also, you know, I was doing movement, I was doing Dalcroze Eurythmics, and I was doing theater as a child. And I went to Sarah Lawrence, and yeah. Who's over there? Yay! Yeah, I went to Sarah Lawrence, and they allowed me to make in my senior year to do a combined performing arts program because I did have these interests. So this is a very personal thing to me, but I think later I realized it was a real social kind of thing as well. So I had a combined performing arts program where I was in the voice department. I was doing some music composition, dance department, dance composition, and some theater. And I started making pieces where I was trying to combine these elements like movement and voice and objects and acting, you know. And I think for me at that point, it was probably like a psychological or psychic kind of necessity of integrating myself. But when I started working and when I went to New York, I realized it was indeed like a larger idea because our world is so fragmented. And coming from the Western European tradition, in singers at that point, so this is what we're talking about, the 60s, singers were just singers, dancers were dancers, actors were actors. You know, God help you in a classical vocal lesson if you moved at all. You were supposed to stand like this, you know. So it was very specialized. And I realized that that also only had to do with the Western European tradition. If you think about African culture, Asian culture, also accounts of early performance rituals in ancient times, everything was linked. You know, it wasn't that if you like, for example, in Indonesia, the more things that one body does, the more honored you are. Whereas here, I was put down like crazy for years and years and years and years. Like, how can you do all those things? Oh, you know, you can't do all these things. I was like, you have to work harder when you do all these things. You know, it's not like a dilettante. You know, all the elements have got to be at the top level. And then the weaving process for me as a person who loves structure was something that was really, really exciting and interesting because I love form. How can I make new forms?
Yeah, it's one of the first. I remember one of my first saxophone lessons at college was to move less, and also I studied at the University of the Arts in Berlin, and I was the first year of what was the Jazz Institute, the newly formed Jazz Institute. And the first year we didn't have a building, so we were placed in all these different buildings with the classical people, then with media studies, and then after 1 year we got moved to our own building. It was completely isolated from everybody else.
Whoa.
But I'm still thriving from the first year, and I sometimes wonder what would have happened if there were 4 more years of that integration.
Exactly. And everybody doesn't have to do that. I mean, I just feel like the point is to find your own way, whatever that is. For some people, for example, a life of being a vocal interpreter of music is an honorable and beautiful thing to do. That's a full thing. It just depends what your temperament is. Mine was wide. I had like a wide interests. Now, how could I weave those together to make a form that was inevitable and strong and, not all over the place? When I first came to New York, there were a lot of people working in different media, but they were just throwing any film on it. It was like the medium is the message, but, I don't believe in that 100% because it was just throwing any film on, any tape on. It was sort of that idea of mixed media, but I was never interested in that. I always wanted to make in a way, kind of poetic, performance form for the senses, but that had integrity and had, was like a poem.
One thing that I've seen you talk about is this idea of creating worlds in your pieces. First of all, I think that's such a beautiful analogy, and to kind of like explore these worlds. Since we just saw Cellular Songs, how did you build that world?
Hard work. Well, first of all, Cellular Songs is the second part of a trilogy that has to do with our relationship to nature. And the third one is called Indra's Net, which we did premiere at the Holland Festival, and we're doing it at the Armory in New York in September. And that has an orchestra and 8 singers and then a chorus of 8 people. So it's a little larger scale. But the first one that I worked on was called On Behalf of Nature, and that was in 2012. And I was very inspired, thinking a lot about ecology, reading The Road, reading a very interesting book. I think it's called Hooked, which is about Asian communities who have figured out ways of actually getting through these horrible situations where the fishermen are not allowed to fish, and they figured out a way to work through it and get it that they figured out an ecological way, like to make it that people can still fish. And I think in Japan there was a Zen temple that started working with some kind of energy saving, so that it actually could be that energy could be used for the whole city. Just these kinds of solutions. So I was really interested in that, and so. I read an article by Gary Snyder, who was a wonderful poet he was one of the Beat poets, but also wrote very early on ecological writing in the 70s, with 70s language, but he really saw ahead of what was going to happen to this world. Brilliant. So there was an article called Writers and the War Against Nature. And he said, we have got to, as artists, I took writers to mean artists, we have got to do work that speaks for entities that can't speak, meaning nature, and that in the shamanic tradition, there are 2 branches of it. One is telling the truth, and one is evoking these beings or realms that can't speak for themselves through dance and music. So that one I was like, ooh, really, through dance and music? That's really interesting. And so I started working on behalf of nature. And that was hard because, I feel like all my pieces have something to do with nature. Like, what were we going to do? Tweet, birdies and everything? No. So it really was a piece about evoking the energies of nature that we are in danger of losing, but not trying to imitate nature at all, but just the energies. And then I got started. I began getting interested in these cells idea, and that, in a sense, is taking that same idea but going deep into the body as a kind of metaphor. And Indra's Net comes from a Hindu-Buddhist legend, which is about an enlightened ancient king who makes a net over the universe, and at each intersection is an infinitely faceted jewel that reflects all the other jewels. So that's really a piece about our world, interdependence, and how interdependent can we get? Like in the pandemic, I was working for 10 years on internet, and I was like, maybe I'm too late, because the pandemic came, and were we interdependent? Yes. Did some people think that? No. But I mean, how could you say that we're not totally we were all experiencing a phenomenon in the world, in the whole planet. So I feel like if we're not thinking in those terms, we're just this little planet. Why are we wasting our time with politics?
When you can make art, yeah.
Well, when we can think about the world, whatever that means.
Yeah. Oh, that's so inspiring. I'm very interested in your creative process, and
I didn't answer your question at all.
No, you actually, definitely. How can I picture you working, in an, let's say, when you conceive such an idea and you're inspired, like, do I imagine Meredith Monk sitting at the piano with a pencil and staff paper and like checking things out, or do you already have movement as part of this process?
These years, usually music comes first. Although in Dresnet, I had that image, like how would you make jewels in music? How would you make a netting in music? And I had to wait a number of years until after I finished Cellular Songs. I couldn't figure it out because it was a visual concept. I didn't want to do illustration, but what would a jewel in music mean, or what's an interdependent structure? So in Cellular Songs, as I said, I was in New Mexico. I was working on these little trios, and what I do is I have an old 4-track cassette tape recorder. Nice. I laid down my first track, and I made those little pieces on my own voice. And so they seemed to have a kind of motory kind of feeling. And I was reading the Siddhartha Mukherjee book, and I was like, wow, I think this has something to do with these songs. So I build very small, like a mosaicist. I build little elements. And then, or another way I say is, I have vegetables. I'm making a soup, and I've got the vegetables, and I'm simmering the vegetables, and they're vegetables, and they stay vegetables for quite a while until the moment that they have to boil down into a soup. And that's a sad moment for me, because that's when I have to make my real structure, and then all the possibilities are limited to that structure. But I try to stay as open as long as possible with the elements. And I would say that the way that I get material is intuitive, but then the other side of my brain is the way I put things together. So.
And when is the point that you decide to bring it into the ensemble? Or, in other words, how much is predetermined, and how much of the shape and maybe even the music do you leave to the collaborative process when you get together?
I've never gone into a rehearsal with, now we're going to just improvise, never. Right. I improvise to get my material, and then there's a certain point where I bring it into the group, and they know my way, and so I work a lot, almost like you could say sculpting it. Theo would say, I come in with my sketches. I have sketches. Usually don't have a whole structure. I do, I have had to do that because of the pandemic, a little bit more score-oriented. But what I like to do is just bring my materials in and then sculpt in the studio with the feedback that people give. So and I like people to know what the decisions are. Right. So by everybody working through it with me, it becomes something that everybody owns. And then after that first rehearsal period, I'll usually go back alone and rethink or revoice or do this or add material or whatever, and then we have our final process.
Gotcha. And you gave me your scores during the rehearsal, and it was really cool to see your music. And one of the things that I noticed immediately is that you wouldn't have like voice 1, voice 2, voice 3. It's actually they're the initials of the singers.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you think of each individual singer when you write this? Or
a lot of times, yeah. Some pieces, I'd go into rehearsal and go, oh, okay, Theo, why don't you try the top line, and Katie try the bottom line, and Allison try the, and then we'll switch. Why don't you, Katie, try the top line? We just keep on working on it, like in a very physical way. But for example, in Mercy, I made a piece for Theo Bleckman called Doctor Patient. He was the doctor, I was a patient. But I really thought about it as his voice. And I wrote another piece for Katie, right for her. So sometimes that happens as I'm working. I'm going, gee, that would sound wonderful for this person or that person.
And about when you put an ensemble together, how do you do that? Like when, for example, you have your vocal ensemble that you've been working with for many years, and the majority of them have been in it for a long time.
Yeah.
When you put something together, and personnel, I mean, that's such a weird word, but you know, when you put your cast together, what are the things that you're looking for?
Well, first of all, I'm looking for the radiance of each human being. That's really important. I look for the human thing as much as I do for the skill set. And yet, people really do have to have really good intonation. This is very difficult music, very intricate. So really good intonation. I don't really want an opera kind of sound, but all of us, you know, Katie comes from a classical background, Allison comes from a classical background, I do, you know, semi. and so, you know, I want, you need to have that, you know, that good intonation, good rhythmic ability. I'm looking for each voice to sound different. I don't want everybody to sound the same. I'm looking for the willingness to move, or to be a really good, you know, or some people come more from dance and then sing very well. I'm looking for generosity, and I'm looking for no ego. I'm looking for people that can part sing very well, very complicated part singing, and canonic parts, you know, like very complicated part singing. So it's a lot of stuff. So what I do, if I've had to audition now, I auditioned Theo by dancing with him at my 50th birthday party.
I'm sure he
but
did
I
a
had
great
heard
job.
him sing, you know, and I was like, oh, I love this guy. So I had heard about him, so I knew he could sing. And there were also for Atlas, some of the auditions were really funny, because Tom Bogdan, who played the father, I hadn't even heard him sing, but I knew he sang. I just knew he sang well, and he just walked in the door. I hadn't even heard him sing. I go, oh, I want you to be in my opera. And then I had written the father's part as a baritone, and then he has this beautiful tenor, so I rewrote it. Because I just knew the feeling of him. You know, I think that's why we have lasted so long, because we love each other. Yeah. You know, and we have we have fun. You know, it's like a family.
That definitely comes through. Yeah. One thing that's interesting.
I just want to say one other thing. Yeah. So for the auditions, I don't have people come and just sing something goodbye, their aria, because I can't tell. You know, I teach a workshop. It's a 3-hour workshop, and then I do, you know, we do movement. I had to give the divas like sweatpants that came up my stairs and high heels. No, please wear sneakers. You know, but what I like is to give people something. I think the audition thing is so awful. And for years, I never auditioned. People just kind of came into my life. But for Atlas, I had to. And so, you know, I just felt like, well, I want people to take something away with them, because they're putting their, you know, their hearts on the line there.
This piece, Cellular Songs, you are in the process of recording, right?
Yes.
There's still some recording left.
A little bit more to do.
Okay. I came to your music through recording. So my first record was Do You Be.
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
You know, for a while that was out of print here in America, but Manfred Eicher and I, that's one of our favorite albums, Do You Be.
It's definitely one of my favorites as well. But also then the first time I saw you live, which was this piece in Hamburg 2020, it was like, wow, this is amazing, like, because all these pieces came together for me. And I just wonder how you think about recording, because a piece that is so multidimensional.
I know. That's why it's taken me 5 years to do it, and I've been reluctant, you know, because I have I'm a kind of studio shy sort of girl. I actually hate recording, to be totally honest with you, because this thing is looking at you, and it's not these people. And, you know, you think, oh, I've got to do it. And you get into that mind, like, I've got to do it right. You know, my pitch has got to be, you know, and then you just lose that fluidity. So it's not my happiest time. But then there have been wonderful moments. over the years. Where like Do You Be on that album, I just was on in another dimension. There have been moments when technology and inspiration have come at the same time. There have been many times that technology and inspiration have not. Like, when I'm doing great and the tape breaks or something, or the tape is all there and then, we're tired or something like that. So, what I try to do with records is also to restructure them and to sometimes I add more instruments so that you get more the visual, since you're not going to have the visual thing, that you get like a fuller auditory experience.
Yeah, you mentioned that you might want to add some vibraphone to this.
Yes, there is vibraphone added to
Interesting.
this, which is very nice on some of these things.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Since you record for ECM, is Manfred Eicher ever part of these productions?
Yes, I mean this is one where he isn't, and I miss him a lot. He usually produces most of them.
How is if I may ask, how I'm actually curious on how you met him, but also how his role is in this situation working with you, because I think you have. I observed some of the aesthetic and sensibilities are very similar, actually, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I've stayed with the label so many years, because I feel the essence, our sensibilities and our values are very much the same, like acoustic, like a lot of space around things, timeless music that will still sound hopefully good 50 years from now, like it's not locked into this time particularly. And he's a very sensitive. I mean, sometimes it's been hard with him, and where he always wins because he has his hands on the dial. And where every time I hear it, I'm just like, you didn't. That wasn't right, So, but how I got into ECM was that the late Colin Walcott. I don't know if any of you know he was in the group Oregon. And then in a wonderful group with Don Cherry and Nana Vasconcelos called Cadona. So Colin was one of my dearest friends. He also produced my first two albums, Key and Our Lady of Late. He was recording for ECM. And I sent tablet to Manfred, and which ended up being on Vergo label, because Manfred said, we're not ready for a singer yet. He said, I know your work, I follow it, but we're not ready for a singer yet. And then we recorded Dolman music in this teeny weeny little studio, hometown studio, so it was Colin producing. And we sent it to Manfred, and he said, I want it. And I had a contract with Vergo, and I had to break that. And it was, but I knew that ECM was the right label for my music. Yeah. So these things just happen in life,
Yeah, for sure. I think I don't want to drag this out too much, because I think we have maybe some questions in the audience. Does anyone would like to ask something? Oh, right here in the middle. You're getting a microphone from behind.
How long have you been singing?
Hello. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, how long have you been singing?
How long have you been singing? Have I been singing? Since I was a baby. My mother was a singer, and my grandfather was a singer, and I used to sing when I was a little teeny person, like putting myself to sleep is how it's like singing was easier for me than talking. It was like breathing. It's a good thing to do. I hope you sing. It's fun. Do you sing too? Yeah. It's a good thing to do, even for yourself. It's a nice thing to do in your life. It's a wonderful life. Thank you for that question.
You don't have to be shy.
There's somebody over here.
Hi. You sort of asked this question earlier, which is, where do your ideas come from? And you mentioned intuition, and I'm curious, where do you think that comes from?
I mean, I feel like sometimes I think like making a piece is sort of like a way of dealing with, this is going to sound so weird, but like putting a very soft protective circle around reality or something like, it's like if I'm in the middle of a piece and everything reminds me of that piece or something like that, And I mean, I read a lot. I'm a real film buff. I watch a film every day. I love film history and film. I adore film. And so it's not coming from nothing, it's coming from also taking in and then sifting through. And so I don't think it comes from zero, but I do really try every time to start from zero, like Suzuki Roshi, beginner's mind. I try not to carry the backpack of my past as much as possible, try to get to something fresh. Because I think that each piece is a world, and some pieces more than others feel like that world exists already in another realm, and I'm just bringing it to birth. And I'm going, my question is, what do you need? What are your laws? What are your principles? Like I'm asking it. Make yourself known. And then sometimes I'll have something I love, and I know that it's going, no. I have to get rid of my favorite thing because that world has got these principles, and each world is a sonic world of its own. Each world is a movement world of its own. That's what I'm trying for. So it's a lot of listening. I would say the process is a lot of listening. I feel like I'm the good ones. I feel like I'm a receiver. The ones where it's like, okay, the old shoemaker continues with her discipline. That's I mean, even when I'm a receiver, it's a lot of work. It doesn't come like, oh, thank you very much. It's all there. No. It's hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work, and I can trace the work. Like, oh yeah, I remember when I was sitting in MacDowell Colony and that theme for Atlas came, and I was at the piano in this studio, and I listened to it years later. I'm going, how did I do that? Or who did that? or something like that. It's so mysterious.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
A while back you talked about working to give a voice to the parts of creation that can't speak. And I think that's wonderful. But it also seems to me that they are speaking.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And
they are.
Yeah. And who's listening?
Exactly. And it's not like trying to, what would I say? It's just acknowledging them. It's not trying to, be them or anything like that.
No.
It's more, I did a piece in the late 90s called Magic Frequencies, and Magic Frequencies is in astronomy. They're the radio frequencies that are centered on not oxygen, hydrogen, the hydrogen atom, and so these radio astronomers send out these frequencies, hopefully that they'll be able to hear extraterrestrial life. And it can take 50 years to go out there, and they think that if those frequencies are connected to the hydrogen atom, which is prevalent in the universe, that they'll hear it. And so the whole piece is about, it's a little bit like what you're saying. It's like we do these very ordinary scenes. We're sitting at a dinner table, but then there are these things that come that you can't really, that would be invisible, but you see them. And also, another thing is stars are always singing, and we don't hear them. But I think a lot of it is also just listening more.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about the trees. People are gonna think I'm crazy, but
I don't think you are.
This morning, I don't know, it was just so weird. I was like on the train, and these phrases came to me about a little tree saying, "I'm just a tree. Please see me and let me live."
You're right. Exactly.
And I think that's there. And
it's definitely there.
And I think.
Well, you know about mycelium, don't you? The mycelium underneath the tree roots.
Yes.
So they do communicate. The trees do communicate.
Yeah, they do. And so it seems to me, what I imagine sometimes is that if more of us listened and tuned in, things would change quite quickly.
Well, that's what meditation is about. It's quieting down the blah, blah, blah of our own thoughts to be able to actually take in that there's actually reality out there. But it's easier said than done. I've meditated for years, and that's what we're all living with. And then somebody goes, "Did you see that flower over there?" And I'm like, "No, I was thinking about blah, blah, blah." So it's just, but it's a great thing to say this, because we all can work on it. Because we miss a lot by not paying attention. Yeah.
I'd love to know what you're reading right now.
Let's see, I just finished a very beautiful book by let me think, because, I have so many books I'm reading. I've got like a lot of books on my shelf that I'm trying to remember the last one I've been raving. Oh, yeah. I read a beautiful book called Street Zen by David Schneider, and it's about Isan Dorsey, who was he was a Zen monk. He ended up being a Zen monk, and he started the first hospice for gay men with AIDS during the 80s. But he had been like a drag queen and prostitute, lived out on the street, took drugs, drank, and everything that you can think of. And then somehow he found his way to the San Francisco Zen Center, and Suzuki Roshi kind of recognized his inner being, which was really pure and really generous. It's such a beautiful thing about, how we can transform as human beings and continue transforming. He was just a beautiful, beautiful person, and it was so inspiring. And he ended up dying of AIDS, but he was the kind of person that he'd go into somebody's room and hug them and kiss them. He was not like, "Oh my God, I'm not going to touch them." He had lived the street life. He had total compassion for everyone. So that was the last thing I've read. David Schneider, it's so good. I'm also a mystery reader, too. I've read almost all the Georges Simenon, the Maigrets, almost everyone. I've got like a pile like this. I can go through a million. Touring a mystery book is the best. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. This was so amazing.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, because it seems like science informs a lot of your work. I mean, the title of this piece is Cellular Songs, but also you've mentioned Buddhism, Zen Buddhism a couple times. And
I'm actually, my lineage is Tibetan Buddhism.
Oh, I see.
Kagyu lineage,
yeah, I was just curious, to what extent spirituality is a part of or informs your artistic work.
It informs it very much, and it took me years to speak about it. It's kind of hard to speak about, but I think, like, as a young person, I think what changed my way of thinking about things was I was asked to teach at Naropa Institute in the early days when this Lama, Trungpa Rinpoche, came to America. He was an early, have a good evening. And I would notice that what I had thought were my aesthetics really had a lot in common with basic Buddhist principles, which is fluidity of time and space, presence, immediacy, everything's changing. A lot of principles that I had done in my work as a young artist, and I thought that was really, just my aesthetic. And then I realized, no, it really had a lot to do with the Buddhist way of thinking about things. So little by little, I ended up committing myself. And these last years, I've just been feeling like, what better way to spend your life than to make pieces about subjects that you can't make pieces about, and to just contemplate. That contemplation is part of the process of making work. And I do think that right now in this world, it is very important. There are many artists that are really trying to do art as a spiritual practice. So, many are doing political work, which is, also wonderful. And then some of us are doing more artist spiritual practice, more timeless work. And I think that it's very important in this world, to have a kind of antidote to the poison of this world and the pain and suffering of this world, to offer like something that's life-affirming. So that's what I've committed myself to doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. One more, and then I think everybody wants to go home, so.
Thank you. The last one. I was very
Oh,
happy.
yeah, and then we have one more right here.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. Okay. Double booked. Let her go first then.
All right. So I was very happy to see your performance today. I saw one before in Poland, in Poznań, when you
Oh.
came to the festival Animator, which was run by my husband.
Well, Katie was in
Marcin.
that performance too. That was in
Wonderful.
the cathedral, right? In
Yes, yes, yes.
we'll
that's
never
wonderful.
forget that. We have to tell you a really funny story about that. So we had all this staging. We were going to walk through the audience and everything. It had so many people. It was so packed we couldn't do our staging. So we just had to like get up onto the front and sing. I think none of us will ever forget that performance.
Well, that's wonderful.
Poznań.
I remember it very well as well. And I remember we talked afterwards because you stayed for several days. And I wondered today, because I am very much language person, and in one piece you kept saying this little word nie, which is no in Polish. And I think we had this conversation about the phonetic sounds of languages. So my question is, when you work on your songs, do you get inspired by phonetics of various languages?
Well, actually, it's nyem. It's not nye, it's nyem, 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 nomi, 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 nomi. No, actually, when I'm working not with language, not like Happy Woman or something like that, I actually am it's really trying to find a sound world. And it is funny sometimes that it does. There's one song where I go, oh, wee, oh, wee, oh, wee. And I was in France and everybody was laughing, of course. So, you do have that possibility that it links into a language, even though I'm trying to do a more abstract sound world.
But anyway, your visit is well remembered in Poznań, so
Thank you. We
Thank
will
you.
never forget it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dziękuję. And our last one?
Yes. Hi, Meredith. We met at Naropa a number of times. But this doesn't have that much shape, but maybe some words as a question. I guess I'm wondering about intention in performance, intention and travel with yourself and audience, and trance, and the sort of, the travel between those things. That's a very shapeless question.
Intention is to be as present as possible, to be as focused on one hand and as open to what's happening in the moment on the other hand. And what's really beautiful about working with my beautiful colleagues is we're always there for each other, so it's very much being aware of our energies and then of course the energy of the audience. That's the beautiful thing about live performance that we never got in the COVID days. Katie and Allison and I did a concert. It was wonderful to sing together. We were online, on Jamulus, and we could hear each other. But, we did this thing. We gave our hearts and soul, and then, boom! It's just like a vacuum. It was so weird, like no energy coming back to bring it back around again. Because I think of it more like a figure eight of energy. So that's, the audience the love is gone but two ways. And then the traveling, I'm not sure what you mean by that. And then, and the trance
I guess
is...
these moments where it is these almost trance-like moments that are, there's exchange, and then there's moments where we're witnessing.
That's interesting. I mean, we can't really trance out because it's too precise.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I was
And it's funny,
experiencing a trance.
people ask me the question like, when you're doing those emotions, are you feeling those emotions? Well, I am, but there's a little place where I have to be present. There's that other little place. So it's being present in two ways simultaneously. The focus one. Yeah, and then the feelingful one is there too. But you can't go all the way out. Because the way that I feel is like, if you go all the way out, then it doesn't let the audience have any room to have their feelings. That's very important. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming out. Also, on behalf of the music department, I want to thank the BI for being such good partners in this.
And there's Katie and Ellen over there. If you
Oh,
stand
yeah.
up, stand up.
Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you for coming out.